All right, let's go ahead and get to this next piece, which is Hasan Piker actually talked to some of the incarcerated firefighters, some roughly 1,000 of which have been sent out to fight these blazes. This is part of a program, longstanding program in California, where California inmates are trained in fire prevention and firefighting techniques. There's a number of camps established across the state. And then they're sent out to fight these blazes alongside professional firefighters, but earning some $5 to $10 per day. So Hasan, who lives in LA or the LA area, went and actually spoke to some of these individuals. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
All right.
Dangerous work.
Will you like it?
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's almost like a respite from being? Is it better than being in prison or no?
It's way better because I was in a prison yard. I'm seeing guys get stabbed, get jumped, get beat up. The cops treat us like shit. But here, we get better treatment, right? They talk to us like humans. They talk to us like humans. We got a job. We're underpaid, but we got a job.
Yeah.
You feel me? And then the community comes out and shows us all kinds of love. We never received that growing up. We never received that kind of love, that kind of recognition for anything we've done. So now, doing this kind of stuff and all this love coming, that's life-changing for a lot of guys, because that's all they be needing is a little bit of recognition. With this, it's life-changing, and we get opportunities at careers.
How long was your sentence? You don't mind me asking?
17 years.
17 years?
Yep.
God damn. They're gonna shave it off.
Yeah.
They're gonna shave it off now.
They're gonna shave it off. They're shaving some off.
They better shave it off.
So
California State doesn't have any sort of like reintegration program.
California has MCRP program, and thank God for Scott Button, he's trying to integrate his ARC program. So MCRP is the reintegration program from being incarcerated to being on the outside. It's limited, but it's offering you a way to try to deinstitutionalize, but in a sense, it's kind of just keeping you on a leash. Sadly to say, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
They do offer some programs, but they're very limited. Very limited because they're usually private-owned companies.
Again, earning $5 to $10 per day to risk their lives in these fires. Obviously, that's atrocious. They should be earning a lot more. You ask yourself, okay, well, why do they do it then? And number one, and those guys described some of the aspects. Number one is the sense of like, okay, we're able to get back to the community and earn this level of respect, which is something we don't normally get to experience as, incarcerated people. And then the other hope is that the sentence will be somewhat reduced, although the amount that it's reduced is like very, very small. For every 1 day they serve, they get 2 days knocked off of their sentence. But the other hope is that, okay, well then when I get out of prison, I'll be trained and I'll be able to get a job in this sector. And, there's a lot of research that says when you are able to get a job coming out of prison, you're much less likely to reoffend and end up back in prison. There's a nonprofit called the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program, which tries to help individuals like these guys who participated in this program be able to enter into forestry and wildland firefighting. Their recidivism rate is 10% compared to the California state average of 42%. So it is a significant amount. The problem is that actually up until just a few years ago when they passed legislation to deal with this, if you had a criminal record, you couldn't go into firefighting. So all of your training and your hopes would be completely quashed. And it's still very difficult. So not a lot of individuals are able to go out of prison and go into this particular industry. The other thing that's a concern here, Saagar, especially when you're, using an incarcerated labor force for, insanely low wages, they also found they were much more likely to experience injuries, whether it was cuts, bruises, dislocations, fractures, also injuries from smoke inhalation. So there's also concerns that, they're not treated the same way and protected in the same way that the professional firefighters are.
Yeah, I was reading here just now about the way that this program is justified in terms of the work release and also their ability to then transition. I know that this is common in many prisons to train certain types of skills that can transition, like electrician and or other jobs, but obviously it seems pretty crazy that you couldn't work this job, so there was no point really training it. I mean, obviously it's something to do to get out there. But yeah, it was interesting to see this. I didn't realize that this is such a widespread practice in the state of California, which I do think has the largest prison population of any state in the overall I mean, it's also the most populous state in the entire union. So yeah, I had no idea that this was such a common practice.
Yeah, it is pretty wild. At the same time, you were referencing there's a lot of price gouging going on right now in the state of California, specifically with regard to rental apartments. So obviously people's homes have been devastated. Massive areas have been evacuated. You have a lot of people looking for a temporary place to stay. You can put this up on the screen. Apparently, the the desire for rental housing in the area is just absolutely insane. The headline here, real estate on LA's west side grows further out of reach with the fires. This real estate agent says, usually I get 5 to 10 applicants in total for a rental. Today, for one apartment listing in Brentwood, I got almost 1,000 applicants. 1,000 applicants. Let's go ahead and put this next tweet up on the screen here. It's a reporter who was digging into some of the numbers here. A furnished Bel Air home on Zillow today went for $29,500 a month, so almost $30,000 a month. A few months ago, it was roughly half that. The asking was $15,900. I called up the agency. She said she told her client to relist the home after this week's LA fires. Quote, people are desperate. You can probably get good money. $30,000 a month. That is absolutely
$15,000 to $30,000 a month.
Absolutely.
I mean, look,
insane.
again, it's hard. I know most people are like, oh, if you can afford $15,000 a month, you can afford $30,000. It's like not the point. The point is that you're watching rapid, shrinkage of the housing market. And I was actually just reading this morning from the Wall Street Journal about how a big problem in the state of California are elderly citizens who are like 69, 70 years old who bought their home some 30 years ago and are house rich. And it's a good problem to have, but now your house is gone. There's a big question. They bought their house at $500,000, $600,000, something like that. Now it's worth 2.2, 3.5 million. I talked previously about that with the Pacific Palisades, specifically where the average home price is roughly like 3.5 million. Most of the people who bought them did not buy it for anywhere close to that. There's a lot of questions for them about the carrying cost of those houses. There was a Prop 13 in the state of California, locks the amount of property tax that you pay to only increase by some 1% to 2% and not on the assessment of the current home value. So the question for them right now is if that's gonna reset whenever they rebuild their home, will they be reassessed at the current market value? There's no way that if you're making Social Security or even like $100,000 a year that you can afford $40,000 a year post-tax expense on property tax. So there's that.
So have you been able to get an answer about
No one has answered me. There has been, so I asked actually some California policy heads. Some people said, well, maybe, but they have to rebuild it with the same configuration. There's also a question of the actual cost of timber and a lot of the housing the inputs that go into it. Also, if you rebuild more than I think it's 110%, it could trigger a reassess. There's a lot of regulation and red tape here where, I mean, look, if you got the opportunity to rebuild your house, you may want to do things a little differently. You don't necessarily want to do something, same floor plan from 1970, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Right, so it doesn't seem unreasonable to say, well, there's an opportunity to do something new, but if you do, you're gonna get penalized for it. And then actually it could trigger your own carrying costs of this. So there's a big question mark of what you're gonna do and how they're actually going to be able to both have the rebuilding. Gavin Newsom has said he's gonna waive the building regulation to allow this to happen. That's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah.
The entire state of California is a NIMBY nightmare for anybody who wants to build housing.
True.
Residents like it that way. Let's also not absolve people of their responsibility. But for the people who have been massively affected by this, in the interim, it is a absolute scramble for a place to stay. So there's a video that's been going around of a woman talking about her house and how she was just hosted Christmas, her kids grew up there, etc. She's like, I'm staying in a hotel. It's like, well, we can all do the math. Average hotel price in the United States is like $200. In the middle of a disaster and all this, we all know, a couple $100, 500, you stay there for a month, all of a sudden you're out like a couple of grand. And you do that, over time. If you're lucky, you can go stay with family. But what are a lot of people gonna do? They're gonna go bust. They don't necessarily have the cost. So this affects tens of thousands of people. And it's a huge question mark as to what happens. I mean, I have relative confidence the people who are genuinely worth millions will figure it out. They can afford the $30,000. But I actually am concerned about these house rich folks because what do you do? I mean, if the vast majority of your net worth is tied up in your house and your house burns to the ground. And now property tax is an existential question, and you already pay the highest income tax in the United States on a state income. What, like, do you stay? Do you go? Will a state actually do everything it can to put you back in? I'm pretty skeptical. And then I didn't even talk about the probably thousands of renters and others who they have nowhere to go. I mean, what do you do? Now you have to compete in a constrained marketplace with now the richest of the rich also entering it and driving the rent up. So it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
And then the longer term prospect too of, homeowners insurance, already State Farm canceled thousands of policies in Palisades, in Pacific Palisades, looking at the risk of wildfire and saying this is not a good bet for us anymore. You are definitely not going to be able to get homeowners insurance in the private market. The California has a insurer of last resort program. It already is very much stretched thin. And, this is a story that's playing out not just in California, but in all kinds of states across the country. This catastrophe has also really raised a lot of questions about the practice of hiring private firefighters. Actually, the New York Times has an article about this morning, but also The Sun had an article about this too, where Rick Caruso, who was a billionaire developer, former mayoral candidate, he hired a private firefighting force, fire crews, to protect his properties in the area. There continue to be questions about whether these crews, because remember, the hydrants were running dry because of the level of, insane demand to try to cope with these fires. So the other question is whether these private firefighting crews are using the public water and, siphoning off some of the critical resources to try to protect properties of people who aren't billionaire real estate developers or celebrities or who else. Kim Kardashian had previously, in a previous fire, had faced a lot of criticism for hiring a private firefighting crew to protect her own property. And, this you also have insurance agencies that hire these crews too to protect the properties that they've insured. And, you might say okay, well, if you're rich and you can do it, why wouldn't you do it to protect your own property if you don't have confidence that the government is going to be able to handle it? But obviously, number one, there's the question of resources. And if you're taking away just because you are wealthy and able to do it, that's one problem. And then the other problem is just, over time, if this becomes an individual, I'm going to have an individual fire response versus we're going to have a collective societal fire response, then obviously you're going to end up with the wealthy having their property protected, the working class getting screwed, and we're increasingly on this trajectory. The number in the New York Times article, Saagar, was 45% of firefighters in this country are private.
How did I not know this?
I had no
idea.
idea.
Am I running in the wrong circles? I've
no
never even heard
idea.
of a private fire department. It would not even cross my mind ever to be let me call a private fire agent.
I didn't know
this
this
just
was
call
a thing.
911.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know. 45%.
Well, and apparently,
it's
the
probably
origin
a thing out west because for us here, fire
we don't
is
have
not
the same
that common.
Yeah, we don't have the same risk, and some of what they do is they'll in advance of a fire, they'll go and try to fireproof the property, whatever is part of what they do too. But the origins of firefighting companies were actually with insurance agencies, and so you used to have this horrifying situation, which we may now be getting back to, where it's if you didn't pay into the firefighting service or into the insurance fund and your house is on fire, we're just going to let it burn. Obviously, the issue with that is that fires don't stay in one place. So, if you let the house of the working class person burn, there's no guarantees that that's not going to, jump to other properties, jump to the wealthy neighborhoods, et cetera. So I see very sort of dystopian situation that is unfolding here as well. You already mentioned, but we can throw this up on the screen, A10, Gavin Newsom passing an executive order trying to get rid of some of the red tape so that they could rebuild faster in these areas. California, famously very difficult area to build in all sorts of regulatory hurdles that have made it difficult and been part of why there's been such a, unbelievable cost of living, specifically with regard to housing costs in LA, San Francisco, all of the major cities in California. And then the last piece, just so people get a sense of well, this is a very devastating and expensive disaster. Who's going to be picking up the tab for rebuilding? Wall Street Journal had a breakdown. Effectively, they're projecting there's going to be something like $50 billion in loss. This is A11 we can put up on the screen. Something like $50 billion in loss. Some portion of that will be covered by insurance. There's a shrinking California insurance market. Will leave LA residents more dependent on a patchwork of federal programs, charitable aid, and their own savings. State Farm last year said they would not renew policy for 30,000 homeowners in California. That includes 69% of those who live in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood. So those people who, it is a very wealthy area. So we're talking about wealthy individuals, but they're going to be kind of screwed. California's plan has 451,000 residential policies. That's up from 40% from just a year earlier. So the number of properties that California as a state is now insuring has absolutely skyrocketed. There is a cap in the amount of damages you can claim there. It's like $3 million, but actually a lot of these Pacific Palisades houses are going to be more than $3 million to replace. FEMA kicks in for temporary shelter and supplies. That's, relatively limited fund, but can help people with hotel costs and, immediate needs. You've got a question about whether the federal government is going to pass an aid package. Trump doesn't like California, doesn't like Gavin Newsom, was elected to pass aid for Puerto Rico. You've already got 2 Republican senators who have said that they want a bunch of strings attached before they pass aid because it's the state of California. So question mark about what you could get there. And then obviously the last bucket of money would just be individuals out of their own pockets and what they're able to scrape together to try to be able to rebuild.
Yeah, I do suspect that something will go through. I know that those Republican senators, but look, not to put on my, blue staters are gonna love me for this. We're really gonna say that they're the richest state in the entire nation doesn't get a federal bailout? Come on. If we look proportionately at the amount of income tax and others that California residents and others pay into the overall federal system, it would be ludicrous to say that they cannot get a overall bailout for disasters, especially when we consistently bail out for disaster relief North Carolina, Florida, Alabama. My maybe woke take is that all states deserve a bailout in the event of a horrible disaster.
I don't think that's a woke take. I think that's just like a basic humanity
I'm just saying,
kind of a take. You shouldn't be punished because the president doesn't like your governor.
I don't think
it's a reasonable take.
I just don't think it's possible. What is it? 15% of the U.S. population lives in the state of California. You got 40 million people who live there. Some of the richest, most important companies to the overall United States. And that's just like a accounting case. I would make the same case for Alabama. What's the poorest state in the union? Mississippi. If a natural disaster hit Mississippi, even if they screwed it up, bail them out. But of course, make sure that what their agencies and others have maybe some strings attached in terms of you have to run it competently. But no matter who you are, if you live in the U.S., I think we should bail you.
Of course. Yeah. No one said after Hurricane Katrina, where both the federal response and the local response was an utter catastrophe, right. No one was like, because your politicians did a bad job, you're not going to get a bail. That's absurd. But anyway, that's a conversation that is going on right now. So a political fight surely to come in the future.
There we go. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.